Good morning. Welcome back to the Junius Maltbeat channel. A little bit of different intro there, mostly for some theatric and dramatic effect as we introduce the story and the theme for today's discussion. We're going to weave together some current articles. There's three of them really that I've picked out and have highlighted different parts of them. We're going to hopefully generate a discussion that touches on not only the subject of course, stacking metals and gold and silver that we always seem to touch on here on the channel. But in the past, we've also brought up discussions regarding cultural changes, the balkanization of the United States, the breakup of this empire, this country, what that would mean, how that would occur, and the social divides that we're witnessing over the last several decades that seem to just get deeper and wider. And hopefully today's discussion can shed some light on all of that and generate some thoughts for those of you not only in this country, but I know we have a lot of subscribers, a lot of friends and community members here that are outside of the United States. A lot of the things we're going to touch on here are not generated or opinions of myself, but are things we are reading and getting from outside sources. So let's jump right into it. Dow breaks 20,000 for the first time. Look at that happy guy. Yay! Dow's 20,000, yay! He's really, these guys are stoked, right? So it's record-breaking territory. Things are looking up. Things are great. As a matter of fact, I remember not too long ago when the Dow broke that 14 and 15,000 mark for the first time. It was amazing. Well, the article that we're going to touch on later, before we get to it, this is the title is Doomsday Prep for the Super Rich. That's the main reason you're going to be here, and the main reason you likely clicked on this video if you are not part of the Junius Maltbeat channel. So please be patient as we get to that discussion. Believe me, there's a reason we are going to touch on these other articles before we get to the main meat and potatoes of today. Well, the student loan crisis is worse than they thought. We hear this quite often, and it's brought up quite a bit. Some people compare it to the housing crisis, the effects that it could have when it implodes on those that invested in or institutions that are tied to the risky loans that were student loans. And a lot of times the solution is brought up, well, there has to be some type of a government solution. There's going to be a government bailout of these loans. Well, that money has to come from somewhere. It's not magic. And there's going to be risks associated and consequences associated with any bailout of the student loans. Yes, they're pretty bad. I'm not going to read through this article because I want to get to the meat and potatoes, but there's going to be some slides up. You'll see some of the statements regarding the student loan crisis. Yeah, a lot of default, a lot of risk. People are not paying them back. It's going to be a greater than $500 billion problem, especially when the interest adds up. And I'm sure some of these are leveraged, and these loans have been bought, sold, and rebought and repackaged, and it's going to be a much bigger impact on some of the lending institutions than we can anticipate. Article number 2, as we make our way towards the main event, the upcoming unprecedented world-changing clash of civilizations. This is a completely separate article from a completely separate website discussing, and it's a very long one, the upcoming and unprecedented world-changing clash of civilizations. Now in this article, they're talking about the protests and the divisions here in America as a result of the political climate and the changes that have taken place just in the last couple of years during a very raucous and contentious election cycle. It then moves into the relationship between the United States and China, political, economic, and monetary enemy, they're calling it, of the next century. The author does have some very harsh words regarding China and their policies. It moves on to discuss Europe and the divisions and the unrest and the friction that's taking place also on that continent. Not only between the European Union and its member nations, but the currency itself and the governments. We have this influx of refugees. We've got different opinions on how that should be handled. There's discussion about the European Union breaking up and countries that leave the Union having to settle their national central bank's claims on or liabilities in full. We're seeing this discussion of a, quote, breakup of the Eurozone no longer being unthinkable. It's becoming commonplace to hear discussions regarding a breakup of the EU. We've already seen the Brexit occur, and now there's discussions of other countries leaving the European Union. It then touches back again on China and the anti-American and the anti-West propaganda that's been published by state-owned publications ever since Trump's election. So there's some friction taking place globally. Apparently, China last week went as far as to, quote, warn America through state-owned newspapers, of course, that if Trump doesn't back off, China will be forced to, quote, take the gloves off, unquote. And it couldn't be clearer that a world-changing clash of civilizations is upon us as the world's power base inexorably shifts east. So there you go. That's just the two main articles that are going to bring us into this big article from the New Yorker. Again, the title of today's discussion, Doomsday Prep for the Super Rich. This is from a reporter at large, written by Evan Osnos. Some of the wealthiest people in America, in Silicon Valley, New York, and beyond, are getting ready for the crack-up of civilization. And I can tell you from very personal experience, that I do know of individuals that are in this category. Some of the wealthiest people in the world, I've seen their estates, I've been near them, and I have, again, personal experience that this is occurring, this is happening. Whether it's weapons, gold, agricultural land, fortifications and redoubts in western states, the super rich are at this moment in time preparing for major chaos and a crack-up of civilization. I am not in that category. I am not one of the super rich in any way. However, I do have knowledge of where some of these locations are and who these people are. This is a photograph of an armed guard standing at the entrance of the Survival Condo Project, which will be mentioned in this article. A former missile silo in Wichita, Kansas, that has been converted into luxury apartments for people worried about the crack-up of civilization. Steve Huffman, the 33-year-old co-founder and CEO of Reddit, which is valued at $600 million, was nearsighted until November 2015 when he arranged to have laser eye surgery. He underwent the procedure not for the sake of convenience or appearance, but rather for a reason he doesn't usually talk much about. He hopes that it will improve his odds of surviving a disaster, whether natural or man-made, if the world ends. And not even if the world ends, but if we have trouble getting contacts or glasses, it's going to be a huge pain in the ass, he told me recently. Without them, I'm expletive. Huffman, who lives in San Francisco, has large blue eyes, thick sandy hair, and an air of restless curiosity. At the University of Virginia, he was a competitive ballroom dancer who hacked his roommate's website as a prank. He's less focused on a specific threat, a quake on the San Andreas, a pandemic, a dirty bomb, than he is on the aftermath, the temporary collapse of our government and structures, as he puts it. I own a couple of motorcycles. I have a bunch of guns and ammo. Food. I figure that with that, I can hole up in my house for some amount of time. Survivalism and the practice of preparing for a crack-up of civilization tends to evoke a certain picture, a woodsman in the tinfoil hat, the hysteric with the hoard of beans, the religious doomsayer. But in recent years, survivalism has expanded to a more affluent quarters, taking root in Silicon Valley and New York City among technology executives, hedge fund managers, and others in their economic cohort. Last spring, as the presidential campaign exposed increasingly toxic divisions in America, Antonio Garcia Martinez, a 40-year-old former Facebook product manager living in San Francisco, bought 5 wooded acres on an island in the Pacific Northwest and brought in generators, solar panels, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. When society loses a healthy founding myth, it descends into chaos, he told me. The author of Chaos Monkeys, an acerbic Silicon Valley memoir, Garcia Martinez wanted a refuge that would be far from cities but not entirely isolated. All these dudes think that one guy alone could somehow withstand the roving mob, he said. No, you're going to need to form a local militia. You just need so many things to actually ride out the apocalypse. Once he started telling peers in the Bay Area about his, quote, little island project, They came out of the woodwork to describe their own preparations, he said. I think people who are particularly attuned to the levers by which society actually works understand that we are skating on really thin cultural ice right now. In private Facebook groups, wealthy survivalists swap tips on gas masks, bunkers, and locations safe from the effects of climate change. One member, the head of an investment firm, told me, quote, I keep a helicopter gassed up all the time, and I have an underground bunker with an air filtration system. He said that his preparations probably put him at the, quote, extreme end among his peers, but he added, quote, a lot of my friends do the guns and the motorcycles and the gold coins. That's not too rare anymore. Tim Chang, a 44-year-old managing director at Mayfield Fund, a venture capital firm, told me, quote, there's a bunch of us in the valley. We meet up, have these financial hacking dinners, and talk about backup plans people are doing. It runs the gamut from a lot of people stocking up on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency to figuring out how to get second passports if they need it, to having vacation homes in other countries that could be escape havens. He said, I'll be candid. I'm stockpiling now on real estate to generate passive income, but also to have havens to go to. He and his wife, who is in technology, keep a set of bags packed for themselves and their 4-year-old daughter. He told me, quote, I kind of have this terror scenario. Oh my God, if there is a civil war or a giant earthquake that cleaves off part of California, we want to be ready. Tim Chang, the venture capitalist who keeps his bag packed, told me, my current state of mind is oscillating between optimism and sheer terror. This is an image from one of the underground condo bunkers. As we skip ahead, Khan co-founded Twitch, a gaming network that was later sold to Amazon for nearly $1 billion. Some of my friends were like, the breakdown of society is imminent. We should stockpile food, he said. I tried to, but then we got a couple of bags of rice and 5 cans of tomatoes. We would have been dead if there was actually a real problem. I asked Khan what his prepping friends had in common. Quote, lots of money and resources, he said. What are the other things I can worry about and prepare for? It's like insurance. It's hard to know exactly. A lot of people don't like to talk about it. Anonymity is priceless, one hedge fund manager told me, declining an interview. Saying you're buying a house in New Zealand is kind of a wink-wink, say no more. Once you've done the Masonic handshake, they'll be like, oh, you know, I have a broker who sells old ICBM silos, and they're nuclear hardened, and they kind of look like they would be interesting to live in. I asked Hoffman to estimate what share of Silicon Valley billionaires have acquired some level of apocalypse insurance in the form of a hideaway in the US or abroad. I would guess 50% plus, he said, but that's parallel with the decision to buy a vacation home. On the opposite side of the country, similar awkward conversations have been unfolding in some financial circles. Robert H. Duggar worked as a lobbyist for the financial industry before he became a partner at the global hedge fund Tudor Investment Corporation in 1993. After 17 years, he retired to focus on philanthropy and his investments. Anyone who's in this community knows people who are worried that America is heading towards something like the Russian Revolution. They invest in the mechanics of escape. He recalled a dinner in New York City after 9/11 and the bursting of the dot-com bubble. A group of centrimillionaires and a couple of billionaires were working through end of America scenarios and talking about what they'd do. Most said they'll fire up their planes and take their families to western ranches or homes in other countries. One of the guests was skeptical, Duggar said. He leaned forward and asked, are you taking your pilot's family too? And what about the maintenance guys? If revolutionaries are kicking in doors, how many of the people in your life will you have to take with you? The questioning continued. In the end, most agreed they couldn't run. Duggar said, the media is under attack now. They wonder, is the court system next? Do we go from fake news to fake evidence? For people whose existence depends on enforceable contracts, This is life or death. By January 2015, Johnson was sounding the alarm. The tensions produced by acute income inequality were becoming so pronounced that some of the world's wealthiest people were taking steps to protect themselves. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Johnson told the audience, "I know hedge fund managers all over the world who are buying airstrips and farms in places like New Zealand because they think they need a getaway." Why do people who are envied for being so powerful appear to be so afraid? Johnson asked. What does that really tell us about our system? He added. It's a very odd thing. You're basically seeing that the people who have been the best at reading the tea leaves, the ones with the most resources, because that's how they made their money, are now the ones most preparing to pull the ripcord and jump out of the plane. Now we'll discuss Hall, the gentleman who is building the luxury bunker condos. Some survivalists disparage Hall for creating an exclusive refuge for the wealthy and have threatened to seize his bunker in a crisis. Hall waved away this possibility when I raised it with him over dinner. You can send all the bullets you want into this place. If necessary, his guards would return fire, he said. We've got a sniper post. Here's an image of one of the pools in this underground bunker. Hall said that he was working on private bunkers for clients in Idaho and Texas, and that 2 technology companies had asked him to design a secure facility for their data center and a safe haven for their key personnel if something were to happen. To accommodate demand, he has paid for the possibility to buy 4 more silos. This is an image of an underground shooting range in one of these bunkers. An American hedge fund manager in his 40s, tall, tanned, athletic, recently bought 2 houses in New Zealand and acquired local residency. He agreed to tell me about his thinking if I would not publish his name. The country has turned into the New York area, the California area, and then everyone else is wildly different in the middle, he said. He worries that the economy will suffer if Washington scrambles to fund Social Security and Medicare for people who need it. Do you default on that obligation, or do you print more money to give to them? What does that do to the value of the dollar? It's not a next year problem, but it's not 50 years away either. And that concludes the article, the highlights from it anyway. There is a lot of material to discuss there and a lot of points that really tie well into the topics that we discuss here on the Junius Maltby channel. That's why I wanted to present this to the subscribers, to all of you out there, to generate that conversation and see what all of you thought. Some key points there. These are some of the wealthiest individuals in the world. You have to agree, you have to see that. These hedge fund managers, these people that exist in the upper percentage of the 1%. One of the individuals I mentioned at the beginning of this video, and I don't know where his status is now, but was once the 45th richest man in the world. And I know of him and I know where he stands on some of these issues just due to connections to that individual through other people. This is something the elite are doing. You can see that they do understand what can occur to currencies. You can see them mention the value of the dollar. You can see that they mention gold and acquiring gold and ammunition and food and living in more remote or agricultural areas, leaving urban centers and cities. One point that I found interesting, and I'm sure there's differences of opinion even among this crowd on how best to approach this scenario, this hypothetical. I would like to hear the rationale behind those that mentioned Bitcoin. Because if you did exist in some post-apocalyptic world, how do you plan on utilizing Bitcoin? That's the one thing I've never understood about these cryptocurrencies. Okay, let's say the grid goes down, the internet doesn't work. What do you plan on doing with an SD card or a flash drive that contains X amount of Bitcoin? How do you prove it? How do you use it? Again, Bitcoin's not the point of this video, so I don't want to go down that road. We've made videos discussing Bitcoin on this channel in the past. That's not the point of today's discussion. The main point, I guess, of today's discussion would be we see there a trajectory being formed. We see headlines, events, news that points to a major unraveling of the current state of homeostasis that we all exist in. This pretend balance that's going to go on forever, this perfect, well, not perfect, but what we consider to be the everyday, the normal. Get up, go to work, go to the park, watch baseball, watch football, go out to eat, this, that. There's no guarantee written anywhere. There's nothing that sets in stone a guarantee for a perfect life for the majority of the people in a particular country and a peaceful existence. I wish that could be. I believe that would be the ideal, of course. However, there are forces, evil forces, dark interests out there, people that prey upon and live on adversity, war, groups not getting along with one another. And unfortunately, I believe that these hedge fund managers, these wealthy elites, these billionaires, I think they see something that you and I here on the Junius Maltby channel see. I think we have something in common with these elites. We see a coming threat, a pending threat, whether it be social in nature, whether it be economic, or a combination of the two, among other things. There is something happening. There is something that could very likely come within the next, we'll use his words at the very end, within the next, let's say, 50 years, that could be detrimental to society, to the economy, to the value of the dollar, to your purchasing power. And the consequences of that could be horrible and diverse in how they affect people's lives. Everything from war and violence to starvation, hunger, food shortages, lack of clean water, lack of health care. Now, I didn't make this video to yell fire in a crowded theater or to stir the already stirred pot and to create panic or anything like that. No, absolutely not. Made this video to spark a conversation, to shed some light on the topic, and if anything, to help validate some of the decisions that many of you here on the channel have already made to prepare in certain parts of your life for changes in the future that might lead to a more uncomfortable existence. So thanks for participating today. Thanks for tuning in to a very lengthy and boring discussion. My hope is that it generates some thoughts and conversations amongst yourselves. As always, thanks for your support and tuning into this channel and being part of this program.